Our next speaker, Dr. Doug Cleverly, spent 20 years working in animal health pharmaceutical development. After a time in forensics, he moved into new farm health and sciences at 92 to 98. In 98, he moved to the United States. And while he was there, he thought, well, a New Zealand company could do better. It would be faster, it would be more cost effective. And that, coupled with the New Zealand can do the number 8 wire approach, but none of the she'll be right mate, would be a unique combination that he felt could take the world by storm, and that he has done with Argenta. It has grown into a company that is not only the leader in animal health research, but also manufactures over 4 million kilograms of products. So please welcome Dr. Doug Cleverly.
Right, well, it's been really nice to be here with manufacturing people, I have to say. I spent most of this week with people who are armed with iPads as opposed to freighting containers and so forth, so it's very nice to be talking about a manufacturing-driven business, i.e. Argenta. I just want to talk a bit about Argenta, just go through what we do, where we operate, what we export and what we make and so forth, but also then go into some of the research that we've done and means by which we've actually commercialised that research. So Argenta is a New Zealand-owned company. It was formed through the combination of a small research business that I formed after coming back to New Zealand, after experiencing what was just described as the sort of aha moment when I was in the United States. I was working for Merck, which is a reasonably large company. It's got a market capitalization of about 150 billion, sorry. It's a very large company. And I was compartmentalized into this very, very narrow part of research. And what I found was a New Zealand company with this cross-functionality that Sean spoke to could actually do things far quicker, far more intelligently, and potentially a lot cheaper. So I came back and started Chem Laboratories. And I combined that with a manufacturing asset called New Farm Health and Sciences, which is a 6-acre site on the Southern Motorway. We raised money, we raised $41 million to purchase that site and my business, and formed Argenta. The whole investment thesis being the combination of research and manufacturing, thereby allowing you to invent and then register and manufacture your own revenues, essentially. And this locks clients into you. We specialise in animal health, and the reason for this is when I was working in the United States, one thing I found was we would have this really interesting, innovative IP we wanted to commercialise as part of this company, but I would go out and secure some contract research services or contract manufacturing services, but no one really understood animal health, because animal health is quite different to human health. When you eat a piece of steak, there are concerns around residues residing in that steak. This is peculiar to with those residues coming from medications that animal might have been administered through its life. This is somewhat peculiar to animal health because that piece of steak doesn't often come from a human being. It comes from a cow or a sheep or whatever. So basically, when you administer a product to livestock, you need to make absolutely certain that there's no trace of residual chemicals left in it. And that's an important distinction between animal health and human health. And also the instruction, take once daily with meals or with food, doesn't work with a cat. So you need to invent things that are very much to the betterment of the animal's health, but also very mindful of how to get that tablet into that cat. Not once, but again, because if you try to do the same thing to a cat, it goes very, very poorly for the owner. We have a manufacturing facility. It's based in South Auckland, and we do manufacture 4 million kilos a year of pharmaceutical product. The key metric around that, half of those kilos, or the 2 million of those kilos, we actually invented. So those products we've actually invented since 2006. And that's our key point of difference between us and a standard contract manufacturing organisation. We have research centres in New Zealand. We're headquartered here. And we also have subsidiaries in New Jersey and in Kansas. When we acquired the New Jersey subsidiary, it was a very effective conduit to bring business to New Zealand. So it served a number of purposes. It added clinical research to the research offerings that we could provide our clients, but also having a US address was actually very, very important, because at the stage when we bought the business in the United States, which happened to be 3 weeks before Lehman Brothers fell over, it was acting as a very, very effective conduit. So people would come to this US address, ask for what the sort of types of services that could be offered, and we actually co-market through that subsidiary before we purchased it. So we could actually, essentially we were being referred 2 from the United States. And Americans, I've struck a few situations where you try to negotiate a contract under New Zealand law, and they look at you quite incredulously, saying, "Well, we didn't realise you had law in New Zealand," and and it's somewhat parochial, and they're being a bit facetious, but there is that sort of, if it's not invented in the United States, therefore it's no good sort of syndrome going on, because the clients that we work with, some of the companies have been around for 150 years. The number of staff that we currently have is 220. And about a quarter of those are scientists, and about 30 scientists are based in the United States. Growth rate since 2006 has been very strong, which is good and bad. Growing strong, investing capital, borrowing a ton of money in advance of 2009. It wasn't the best plan as it turned out. Put a lot of stress on the business, but nevertheless we had actually amassed a huge amount of revenue with which to trade through the GFC. So the vision of the business is to be a true global player, to be insightful, understand what the client wants. Everything we do is client focused. We don't go off inventing the next best mousetrap. We do client surveys to understand precisely what their needs are and invent to those needs and manufacture to those needs. This is a very busy slide, which I won't go into in a big way at all. The key things are the 2 black bits. The first black bit was drug discovery. We don't do that. We leave drug discovery for those clever people in Callahan, in ag research and so forth, that can actually divine a new chemistry or a new molecule that has potential. What we do is take that chemical and translate that into something that actually has the ability to be sold and marketed. So we fill in the middle section between drug discovery or technology discovery right through to the retail sales and marketing. We don't do any retail sales and marketing of products as such. We do market our services, but we basically rely on our marketing partners to do the selling. And we export to 40 countries. And you can imagine having a sales force of 3,000 or 4,000 people is a massive undertaking. So what we do is we actually fill the gap between the early stage discovery and the consumer experience, if you like. So the business model is also all about an animal health focus, 3 business units feeding into manufacturing, being the chemistry, research and development, which is the physical assemblage of a product, the chemicals in it as such, and the packaging of it. Then we have the clinical assessment, which basically requires us to do testing in animals that are actually owned by people. So we don't have animal testing labs and so forth. And the third part is innovation and IP development, and this is all about developing intellectual property that we can then actually license to clients around the world, and then subsequently manufacture the products emanating from that technology. So the fruit of all of this is the actual manufacturing. And manufacturing is where you see the biggest revenue increase in the business. This map here might not be too clear, but it's not very clear at all, but can you actually see it at all? What it is, it's a map that I do present in the United States, which they find quite amusing because they see New Zealand at the centre. And this is how I've always seen world maps with New Zealand in the centre, whereas for an American, they don't know what on earth it is. But the key point here is all about the distance that we are from our key markets. Now, when you're a research business, that distance is completely immaterial. It's absolutely no penalty at all because your product of research is data. Click of a button, your client's got it, no issue. Making 4 million kilos of pharmaceutical product, to give that sort of context, that's a shipping container per day leaving our factory. So it's a lot of mass to be shipping around the world. But what we did is we actually did a survey of where would be the most optimal place to place a manufacturing facility if we could pick ours up and put it anywhere. And the 2 countries that scored highest were Singapore and New Zealand. So given it was in New Zealand, we chose to leave it there. But decentralization of manufacturing will occur as a need arises to deal with specific markets with certain products. But being in New Zealand, we didn't see as a major negative. Track record of growth, so basically 30% compound annual growth rate, and half what we make now, we invented. That's the key measures. In terms of staff, very highly reliant upon research and development. So about, as I say, about a quarter of the company's R&D. The other key thing here is we've got about 23% of the company involved in quality. We probably have more quality assurance, quality control people than the rest of Australasia, I think. It's a huge amount of people. And you see it as overhead, but because we're manufacturing for 9 of the top pharmaceutical companies in the world, if you're not actually geared up to deliver the highest quality possible, then they're just not going to come to you. So quality is one of our key competitive advantages. And this is where this whole she'll be right attitude just doesn't fly in pharmaceuticals at all. And we obviously have about a third of the contingent is production. In order to export, and we do export to over 40 countries, you do need to have a number of accreditations, and these accreditations allow the products that you make to be sold in those various markets. So we are the most stringent of all is the US FDA approval, which we secured in 2007, and last year we were re-audited by the US FDA and passed, so we're still able to sell product into the United States. But that's kind of the gold standard of quality around the world. But we do have obviously local Australian, Japanese, European and Canadian approvals as well, allowing us to export to all these different markets. Give a bit of perspective as to the overhead that those compliance aspects cost you. We got audited, 7 times by clients. Now, when a client comes down, they usually fly a quality team from the United States. They don't have any relationship with you. They don't know who you are. They come into your plant to find out what you're doing wrong. So it's very, very intensive. They can take up to a week. And the follow-up to these audits can take up to a number of months of somebody's time just responding to the findings, or hopefully you don't get too many of them. And obviously, we've had 3 regulatory audits and a number of health and safety audits as well. But quality is key in our industry. I want to talk a bit about the relevance of research. I mean, the business started as a research and development business. It started with only 2 of us back in 2003. But I think New Zealand has this ability to be very, very lateral in their thinking, which is awesome for a research business. It's diabolical for an FDA-approved manufacturing facility. Compliance is something, you have an SOP, a New Zealander will find ways to not follow that SOP. It's incredible. And they'll find all sorts of innovative ways to improve it, change it, make it better. And this is called disobedient thinking. Now, this disobedient thinking, which is a term coined by Geraldine McBride, who I've been travelling with over the last few days, is why New Zealanders are so effective. In the States, when I went into the US, now I have a PhD from Auckland University. I'm working with 20 other PhDs, half of them are Ivy Leaguers, okay? And I get promoted to run this group, and I'm going, well, why on earth would they listen to me? I'm from New Zealand, but the Americans are it's all about hierarchy. So if I said, please jump, they'll ask how high. Now, a New Zealander, you say jump, they'll say why. It's just so different. And now that's wonderful for a research and development business, but it's pretty stressful from where I'm sitting, because FDA hold the CEO liable for any product infractions or any issues with quality. So, this notion of being very lateral and very clever is terrifying from a manufacturing point of view. But the good thing about our research is our research actually earns money. We don't do research for free. And how we do that is that we engage with the market, we understand what the market wants, we identify a need, do a bit of a proof of concept, and we actually get buy-in to the extent that the partner company will pay us to do that R&D. And then, of course, we've got the guaranteed manufacturing rights that ensue from that. So the manufacturing business is the true revenue, the revenue generator of the business, 50 million versus 10 million. But as mentioned, quality must accompany innovation. The whole should be right attitude just cannot be there. This graph here, the key thing is the green line, I guess. The green line relates to the right-hand axis, which is percentage of total revenues coming out of manufacturing, and the green line is all about the percentage of manufacturing revenues that relate to products that were invented by us. So if you see it starts off at around about 30% and it goes up to over 50%, and that's looking to accelerate to 75, 80% in the next 5 years. The good thing about this, if you've invented it, if you actually have the IP for it, they can't just take it away from you and ship it off to another manufacturer somewhere else. So you're actually earning money to research it, and because you own the IP, you're actually locking that client or that revenue stream into your business, and it can't be taken away, which is really key. The other thing of interest there is the solid dark blue band at the bottom. That's just your standard contract manufacturing. It's somebody coming to you with a recipe and says, please make this. You'll see no growth there. The other two lighter shades of blue are all about the revenues coming from products we've invented, and that's where all the growth has come from. So, all of our research is driven off consumer demand. We do a lot of client surveys. We don't do focus groups and things. It's more going out and talking to the end users, and sometimes it can be farmers and pet owners and so forth, which is somewhat peculiar because we're a B2B operator, we're not a B2C. So we sell to businesses, we sell to Pfizer, we don't sell to you, the pet owner, or you, the farmer. I just want to go through a couple of R&D exercises that we've engaged in and been quite successful on, and talk a bit about how we actually got those onto the market. There's a real problem in New Zealand with anti-parasitic resistance. So in the livestock industry, people have been using certain families of drenches and been dosing them for long periods of time, and the parasites become immune essentially to those treatments. And this is because in New Zealand, Australia, we're very intensively farming our land, and this has driven this resistance problem to the fore in these countries. Historically, the industry's relied on brand new chemistries to come through. And brand new chemistry, the good thing about that is these parasites have never seen them before, so they can't be resistant to them. So therefore they work. But they only work for a period of time until those parasites become resistant to them as well. So what we looked at was novel approaches, and the novel approach was to combine a number of drugs into one therapy. Maxagesic is a classic example of Hartley Atkinson, who's a local chap who owns a human pharmaceutical company, combining ibuprofen with, I think it's aspirin, not aspirin, paracetamol. Using two drugs to target the same problem for better efficacy. In this case, we're actually using 3 different drug families. I won't go into it in detail, there's all fancy names and so forth, and I'm not a vet, so I couldn't explain to you how they actually work, but by attacking parasites with 3 different drug families, it's not possible for those parasites to generate resistance to them. So what we've done is we've invented a means of combining these 3 different drugs. The major problem was 2 of them actually react with each other. So by coming up with a formulation that requires them to be separated and stabilised in a product that can be easily administered by a farmer was the subject of maybe about 5 years of research. So the formulation design was critical. There's a little bit of a graphic here basically showing the means of spatially separating these 3 different drugs so that the 2 of them couldn't actually chemically react and degrade. And by doing this and by identifying this technology, and we had 9 patents on it, it allowed for these incompatible drugs to be stabilised and to provide a solution to farmers to combat the resistance problem. One of the other challenges, and this one's quite close to my heart, and I find this quite fascinating, farmer convenience. With lambing and so forth, there's a lot of animal handling required to administer these various pharmaceuticals to the lambs. You have to bring them in, you have to drench them manually, each one. There's a lot of downtime, there's a lot of farmer time required, and the animal handling causes stress and loss of productivity in itself. So what we came up with was using a technology that was first pioneered by the CSIRO back in the 80s, but actually taking that technology and allowing for the administration of a product that would deliver a drug to a sheep for 100 days continuously. So every day it gets a squirted drench, which is just a continuous release of drug into that animal. And the good thing about that is the farmer brings the animals in, doses them, and can leave them be for 3 months, which is a huge advantage. And what's interesting is that we've done studies to show that the cost of this unit, or this one dose, is about $3, but you get about $8 back in productivity alone. So it pays for itself. The thing is, how do you actually have something stay inside of an animal for 3 months without it falling out or stopping working? And the answer to that is a product called Extender, and this is a product which administers a drug for 100 days at a certain dose rate, and here it is here. So the graphic on the right is the actual device, and this is dosed orally, and it goes into the animal, and those wings then release and actually hold that device within the animal for 100 days. It looks quite terrifying, and if you saw a cattle capsule, you would be terrified. It's about the size of my forearm. But basically, this device goes into the animal and it releases drug constantly for 100 days. This is all very interesting to come up with these wonderful ideas and register them, but what's the route to market? The way we work, as I sort of alluded to, is identify the IP, develop it, register it, patent it, or protect it in some way, demonstrate proof of concept, put together a data package and take that to the client and so that client can actually license that IP. Then what we do is we actually get remunerated to develop the product, remunerated to make the product as well. So we actually enter into research arrangements and commercial supply arrangements contemporaneously, which is really good because it leads to assurance of revenues. It leads to protection against competition and also against patent infringements as well. Because when you've got a company with a market cap of 150 billion on your side, it's much less of a proposition for that IP to be challenged. I just want to finish off with a slide of our folk at Argenta. There they are, in the shape of Australia, which was by accident, I assure you. Thank you for listening.
Do we have any questions?